The highway was empty, covered in heavy rain as thunder echoed in the dark sky. Strong winds shook the trees, and the wet road made it hard to see. Emma Carter tightened her grip on the steering wheel, her knuckles white. She had spent the past few hours driving in silence, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't escape. Fired. Unfairly. After years of dedication as a nurse, she had lost everything in a single day, for standing up for what was right. Her tired eyes flicked to the glowing red clock on the dashboard. Almost midnight. The road stretched ahead, endless and empty. She sighed, trying to ignore the ache of uncertainty pressing on her chest. Then, screech. A flash of headlights. A deafening crash. Emma's heart lurched as a black SUV skidded violently across the road, its tires losing grip on the rain-soaked pavement. The vehicle spun, flipped over, and slammed into a massive tree with a sickening crunch. She slammed on the brakes, her car skidding slightly before stopping. Adrenaline surged through her veins. Without thinking, she threw the door open and ran into the storm. The rain pelted her face, soaking through her thin jacket as she sprinted toward the wreck. The SUV's hood was crumpled, steam rising into the cold air. The shattered windshield spilled glass across the wet asphalt, reflecting flashes of lightning. She reached the driver's side and froze. A man sat slumped over the wheel, motionless, blood dripping from a deep gash on his forehead. His face was pale, his breathing shallow and unsteady. Emma's pulse pounded. Unconscious. Critical. Then she heard it, a cry. She whirled around, peering into the back seat through the cracked glass. A small child, no older than 5, was trapped in her car seat, her tiny hands pressed against the window. Tears mixed with rain on her cheeks. Emma's instincts took over. She yanked open the back door, struggling against the bent frame. The little girl's wide, terrified eyes locked onto hers. "It's okay, sweetheart," Emma whispered, forcing calm into her voice. "I'm here. I'll get you out." The child sobbed, gripping the straps of her seatbelt. "Daddy, he won't wake up." Emma swallowed hard, ignoring the icy fear creeping up her spine. She needed to move fast. With trembling fingers, she unbuckled the girl's seatbelt, gently lifting her into her arms. The child clung to her, shaking uncontrollably, her face buried in Emma's shoulder. One life saved. Now the father. Emma rushed back to the driver's side, pulling the door handle. Jammed. She cursed, then slammed her elbow against the shattered window, clearing away the remaining glass. Reaching inside, she felt for a pulse. Weak, but there. "Stay with me," she murmured, gripping his wrist. Then his breathing stilled. "No, no, no," Emma gasped, her heart hammering. She threw open the door, grabbed his collar, and pulled him out onto the wet pavement. Lightning flashed across the sky as she dropped to her knees beside him, tilting his head back, her hands pressing against his chest. 1, 2, 3. She started CPR, forcing air into his lungs, pushing against his chest with every ounce of strength she had. "You're not dying," she whispered through clenched teeth. "Not tonight." The little girl's soft cries echoed through the storm, but Emma didn't stop. She refused to let him die. Rain pounded against the pavement, each drop cold as ice. Emma's hands trembled, exhaustion creeping into her muscles as she continued pressing against the man's chest. "Come on," she muttered, her breath coming in gasps. One more push, one more chance. Then a sharp gasp. The man's chest jerked, his lips parting as he sucked in a ragged breath, his body convulsing slightly. Emma let out a shaky exhale, her heart still hammering. The man blinked slowly, his gaze glassy and disoriented as he looked up at her. Rain dripped from his soaked lashes, sliding down the sharp angles of his face. But when he spoke, his voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "My daughter. Is she safe?" Emma swallowed hard, nodding quickly. "She's fine. She's right here." The little girl, still clutching Emma's rain-soaked jacket, let out a soft whimper. "Daddy?" His eyes darted to her instantly, relief flashing across his face before his expression twisted in pain. His head lulled slightly, and Emma quickly reached out, steadying him. "Stay with me," she said firmly. "Help is on the way." And just as she spoke, the distant wail of sirens cut through the storm. Bright red and blue lights flashed, growing stronger as an ambulance and 2 police cars pulled onto the slick road. Emma turned toward them, waving her arms, signaling the medics. The paramedics rushed forward, their boots splashing in the puddles as they grabbed their gear. Emma quickly rattled off the man's condition, the CPR, the head wound, but before she could finish, she noticed something strange. One of the paramedics had gone completely still, his eyes widening in recognition. He turned to his partner and whispered something. Emma's brows furrowed. Why were they acting so strangely? Then she heard it, a hushed voice, just barely loud enough over the rain. "That's Nicholas Blackwell, the billionaire." Emma froze. Her gaze flickered down to the unconscious man in her arms, her mind racing. Nicholas Blackwell. The Nicholas Blackwell. She had heard the name before. Everyone had. CEO of Blackwell Industries, one of the most powerful and wealthiest men in the country. And she had just saved his life. But Emma pushed the thought aside, forcing herself to focus. It didn't matter who he was. He was still a patient. She carefully helped the paramedics stabilize him, stepping back as they lifted him onto the stretcher. As they secured him, his eyes flickered open once more, weak but aware. His gaze locked onto Emma's, something unreadable flickering behind them. With what little strength he had left, he lifted a hand and gripped her wrist. His fingers were cold, trembling, but his grip was firm. "Thank you." His voice barely carried over the rain. "You saved us." Emma stared, caught off guard by the sincerity in his tone. Then his grip loosened, his eyes slipping closed as the paramedics rushed him into the ambulance. But his daughter didn't let go. She clung tightly to Emma, tears mixing with the raindrops on her face. "Come with us," she sobbed, burying her face against Emma's shoulder. Emma's heart twisted painfully. A medic gently pried the child away, murmuring soft reassurances before lifting her into the ambulance. Emma stood there, watching as the doors slammed shut, the sirens wailing once more as the vehicle disappeared into the stormy night. The street fell eerily silent. She was drenched, exhausted, her mind still spinning. Nicholas Blackwell. She had saved a billionaire and his daughter, and she had no idea how much this night would change her life. The loud pounding on her door jolted Emma awake. Her eyes flew open, heart racing as she struggled to process the sudden noise. Sunlight filtered weakly through the thin curtains, casting soft morning shadows across her tiny apartment. For a second, she thought she had dreamed it, until the knock came again, harder this time. Bam, bam, bam. Emma groaned, rubbing her eyes. Who in the world was knocking like that this early in the morning? She swung her legs over the bed, still groggy, and padded toward the door, wrapping herself in a thin cardigan over her sleep shirt. Peering through the peephole, her stomach dropped. A man in an impeccably tailored black suit stood outside her door. Behind him, parked neatly by the curb, was a sleek black luxury car with tinted windows. The kind of car that only powerful, wealthy people owned. The kind she had only ever seen in movies. Her pulse quickened. What the hell? Cautiously, she unlocked the door and cracked it open. The man, in his mid-40s with salt and pepper hair and sharp eyes, gave a polite but unreadable smile. "Miss Carter." Emma hesitated before nodding. "Yes?" He extended a business card, the gold lettering practically gleaming. "Jonathan Reeves, personal assistant to Mr. Nicholas Blackwell." Emma's fingers tightened around the card. Nicholas Blackwell, the billionaire, the man she had saved last night. The memory of the storm, the accident, the little girl's terrified cries rushed back like a tidal wave. Why was he sending someone to her doorstep? The assistant, Jonathan, adjusted his tie and spoke in a calm, professional tone. "Mr. Blackwell would like to see you." Immediately, Emma blinked. "Excuse me?" Jonathan didn't flinch. "Mr. Blackwell is requesting a meeting with you, Miss Carter. He insists it is urgent." Emma's mind whirled with confusion. Why would a billionaire want to see her? She was just a nurse. She had done what anyone would have done. And yet, a billionaire was sending luxury cars and assistants to her doorstep. Her instincts screamed to be cautious. The logical part of her brain told her to say no, to shut the door and pretend none of this was happening. But deep down, another voice whispered, "What do you have to lose?" Emma exhaled slowly. She had lost her job. She had no stability, no clear future. Last night, she had risked her own life to save two strangers without hesitation. Maybe this was the universe giving her a sign. Straightening her shoulders, she met Jonathan's gaze. "Give me 5 minutes." For the first time, the assistant's expression softened, just a little. Of course, as Emma turned back inside to change out of her sleep clothes, she couldn't shake the feeling deep in her chest. This wasn't just a meeting. This was the beginning of something bigger than she ever imagined. Emma had never seen a house like this before. The mansion before her was breathtaking, the kind that belonged on the cover of luxury magazines. Towering white columns framed the grand entrance, and massive glass windows reflected the morning sun. The driveway stretched endlessly, lined with perfectly trimmed hedges and a fountain so large it looked like it belonged in a royal palace. Her stomach tightened as the luxury car pulled to a smooth stop at the entrance. A butler, dressed in classic black and white formal attire, opened the car door for her. "Miss Carter, this way." Emma swallowed her nerves and stepped out, following him through the grand double doors. Inside, the house was even more magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, and the floors gleamed as if they had never seen a speck of dust. Priceless artwork adorned the walls, and everything, from the furniture to the decor, screamed wealth and power. She barely had time to process the sheer luxury when the butler led her to a large private study. "Mr. Blackwell is waiting for you," he announced before stepping aside. Emma hesitated for a second before stepping inside. Nicholas Blackwell sat behind a massive mahogany desk, a bandage still visible on his forehead, though he looked far stronger than he had the night before. He was dressed in a dark tailored suit, his presence commanding, even in recovery. But what surprised her wasn't the intimidating billionaire in front of her. It was the little girl standing beside him, Lily, the same terrified child Emma had pulled from the wreck, now in a pale blue dress, her curls neatly brushed, holding a stuffed bunny in her arms. The moment Lily saw Emma, her face lit up with the brightest smile. "You came!" she squealed, running straight into Emma's arms before anyone could react. Emma blinked in shock but instinctively knelt down, catching the little girl in a warm embrace. Nicholas Blackwell cleared his throat, drawing Emma's attention back to him. His piercing blue eyes studied her carefully, as if trying to understand her. "You didn't have to save us," he said at last, his voice deep, unreadable. "But you did. And because of that, my daughter is alive." "I am alive." Emma shifted uncomfortably. She didn't do it for a reward. She had done it because it was the right thing to do. "I only did what anyone else would have done," she said quietly. Nicholas let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. "You'd be surprised how many people would have kept driving." Emma fell silent, unsure of what to say. Then Nicholas leaned forward slightly. "I want to repay you." Her brows furrowed. "That's really not necessary, Mr. Blackwell." He lifted a hand, stopping her. "Please, just listen." She pressed her lips together but nodded. Nicholas glanced at Lily, who was still clinging to Emma's arm, before continuing. "You're a nurse. A damn good one, from what I've heard." Emma tensed. Had he investigated her? He smirked slightly, as if reading her thoughts. "I looked into your background. You lost your job because you refused to turn a blind eye to unethical practices." Emma swallowed hard. She didn't expect him to know that. Nicholas leaned back in his chair. "I need someone I can trust to care for Lily. She's been through enough trauma, and I refuse to let just anyone watch over her." Emma's breath hitched. Was he offering her a job? Nicholas continued, "I want you to be Lily's private nurse. Live here if you choose. I'll make sure you never have to struggle financially again." The offer hit her like a shockwave. She had lost everything just days ago. Now, a billionaire was offering her stability, security, and a future. But she didn't do this for money. I don't know, she admitted honestly. Nicholas narrowed his eyes slightly, as if trying to figure her out. Then he gestured toward Lily. Look at her. Emma glanced down. Lily was watching her with wide, hopeful eyes, as if silently begging her to say yes. Emma's heart ached. This wasn't just about a job. It was about Lily. She took a deep breath. Then finally she nodded. Nicholas's expression softened, just slightly. Good. Little did Emma know. This decision was about to change her life forever. The mansion no longer felt like a stranger's house. Days turned into weeks, and Emma found herself settling into her new role as Lily's caregiver. At first, she thought she'd feel out of place. Living in a billionaire's home, surrounded by luxury she could never imagine. But Lily changed everything. From the moment Emma stepped into her life, Lily clung to her like she was her safe place. At night, when the shadows stretched across Lily's room, the little girl would crawl into Emma's lap, gripping her hand tightly. You won't leave, right? Lily whispered one evening, her voice small. Emma's heart twisted painfully. She ran a gentle hand through Lily's soft curls, smiling. I'm not going anywhere, she reassured her. Lily let out a content sigh, resting her head against Emma's chest. And in that moment, Emma realized something. She wasn't just a nurse to Lily. She was becoming something more. Nicholas Blackwell wasn't an easy man to read. At first, Emma wasn't even sure if he fully trusted her. He was reserved, guarded, always watching, as if waiting for her to prove she wasn't like the rest of the world. But as days passed, he saw things that changed him. He saw the way Emma calmed Lily's nightmares, the way she sang to her softly when she was sick, the way she never treated their wealth with entitlement, as if she was only here for what truly mattered. And slowly, he started to soften. Their interactions, once purely professional, became longer, more meaningful. Late at night, when Emma finished putting Lily to bed, she would often find Nicholas in the library, sitting in his leather chair, staring at the flickering flames in the fireplace. One night, as she passed by, he spoke. You can sit, you know. I don't bite. Emma hesitated, but curiosity won. She settled into the chair across from him, the firelight casting soft shadows over his sharp features. For the first time, he looked tired. Not the exhaustion of work, but something deeper, older. I lost my wife in a car accident, he said suddenly, his voice quieter than usual. Emma stilled, taken aback by his unexpected vulnerability. He exhaled, his fingers curling around his glass of whiskey. Lily was barely a year old. I had everything. And then, in one night, I had nothing. Emma swallowed the lump in her throat. I'm so sorry. He gave a dry chuckle. I've heard that phrase too many times. Doesn't change the past. She didn't say anything. For a while, they sat in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was understanding. Then he looked at her, really looked at her. You're different, Emma. Her breath hitched. How so? Nicholas leaned forward slightly, his piercing gaze locking onto hers. You don't care about the money, or the name. You don't try to impress me, and you don't expect anything in return. Emma's lips parted slightly, caught off guard by his intensity. But then, his expression changed, a rare softness breaking through his usually unreadable exterior. I haven't trusted anyone in years, he admitted. But you're different. Emma's heart thundered in her chest. She could feel the shift between them, the unspoken tension, the way his gaze lingered a little too long. But before she could speak, Lily's sleepy voice broke the moment. Daddy? Nicholas turned instantly, standing up as Lily rubbed her tired eyes, clutching her stuffed bunny. Emma's chest tightened as she watched him scoop Lily up effortlessly, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. And just like that, the moment was gone. Emma sat there, watching the man who had once seemed so untouchable, so far removed from human emotions, now holding his daughter with the kind of love that could crack even the strongest walls. And that was the night Emma realized she was falling for him. Hard Emma had no idea that the happiest weeks of her life were about to be shattered in an instant. She had grown comfortable in the mansion, bonding with Lily, sharing stolen moments with Nicholas, feeling like she was slowly becoming part of something real. But reality had other plans. Across the city, in the heart of a corporate tower, Nicholas Blackwell's business partner, Richard Vaughn, sat at his desk, seething. He had seen the changes in Nicholas, the way he looked at that woman, the way he let her into his life so effortlessly. And Richard hated it. Nicholas Blackwell was a man who built walls, who never let anyone in. And now a mere nurse had infiltrated those walls. Richard tapped his fingers against his desk, his lips curling into a smirk. That woman needed to disappear. He made one call, just one. And within hours, the media had their story. Emma had just finished helping Lily with her bedtime story when she heard the heavy footsteps echo down the hall. She turned and froze at the sight of Nicholas storming toward her, his face dark with anger. Her heart dropped. Nicholas? What's wrong? He held up his phone, the screen glowing with a headline so cruel, so shocking that Emma's breath caught in her throat. Exclusive. Nurse or gold digger? The woman who wormed her way into Nicholas Blackwell's life. Beneath it was a photo of her and Lily, laughing together in the mansion gardens. Emma's stomach twisted. "What is this?" she whispered. Nicholas's jaw tightened, his blue eyes dark with something she couldn't quite place. Anger? Hurt? Betrayal? "That's what I'd like to ask you," he said coldly. Emma shook her head, horrified. "Nicholas, you can't believe this. You know me." His grip on the phone tightened. "Do I?" The words felt like a slap. Emma's throat went dry. "You think I did this? That I planned all of this just to... Did you know who I was before the accident?" He cut her off, his voice sharp as a blade. Emma flinched. She shouldn't have hesitated. She should have shouted no without a second thought. But she was too stunned, too hurt to react fast enough. And in that single moment of silence, Nicholas made his choice. His eyes hardened, and he took a step back, as if suddenly seeing her for the first time. "I see." His voice was like ice. Emma felt like the floor had been ripped out from under her. "Nicholas, please," she begged. "I never wanted anything from you. I never wanted money or fame. I think you should go." The finality in his tone sent a cold wave crashing over her. Her breath hitched. Tears burned in her eyes. But if there was one thing Emma Carter refused to do, it was beg for someone to believe in her. She lifted her chin, swallowing back the heartbreak clogging her throat. "Fine." Nicholas's eyes flickered, just for a second, as if he hadn't expected her to actually walk away. But Emma turned sharply, heading toward her room to pack. And Nicholas Blackwell let her go. Emma had barely zipped her bag when she heard the tiny, frantic footsteps. The door burst open, and Lily ran in, her face streaked with tears. "Miss Emma, no. Don't go," she sobbed, throwing her arms around Emma's waist. Emma felt her heart break all over again. "I don't want you to leave," Lily whimpered. "You promised." Emma squeezed her eyes shut, forcing down her own tears. She had promised. But Nicholas had already made his decision. Emma slowly knelt, cupping Lily's tear-streaked face. "You are the bravest, sweetest girl I have ever met," she whispered. "And I love you so much." Lily shook her head, sobbing harder. "Then stay. Please." Emma swallowed the lump in her throat. "I wish I could, sweetheart. But sometimes, we have to let go." She kissed Lily's forehead, then gently unwrapped the little arms clinging to her. Lily let out a heart-wrenching cry, falling to her knees as Emma picked up her bag and walked toward the door. And with every step, Emma felt her own heart shatter into pieces. Nicholas didn't stop her. And when the door finally closed behind her, she knew this wasn't just the end of her job. It was the end of everything. The mansion felt empty. For the first time in years, Nicholas Blackwell didn't feel like the powerful, in-control businessman he was known to be. Instead, he felt like a man who had made the biggest mistake of his life. The silence was deafening, except for the soft sobs coming from Lily's room. He stood outside her door, his chest tightening painfully as he heard her tiny, broken voice whispering, "I want Miss Emma. Please bring her back." She hadn't eaten since Emma left. She wouldn't talk to him. She had shut down completely, and it hit him like a crushing wave. He had ruined everything. His jaw clenched as guilt churned in his chest. He had let his own fears and doubts push away the only woman who had ever meant something. Emma had never wanted his money. She had never asked for anything. And he had thrown her away. Not anymore. Nicholas grabbed his keys and stormed out of the house. He was going to fix this. Finding Emma wasn't easy. She had left without a trace, refusing any financial help. But Nicholas wasn't a man who gave up. Days later, his search finally led him to a small community clinic on the poorer side of town. When he stepped inside, he saw her. Emma stood in the corner, wearing a simple set of scrubs, tending to an elderly patient with the same warmth and kindness she had shown Lily. Nicholas's throat tightened. She had moved on. She had found a place where she was needed, respected, and he had to earn his way back to her. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward. Emma turned and froze when she saw him. Her eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, before she could demand why he was here, Nicholas did something no one expected. He dropped to his knees. Right there, in front of her, in the middle of the clinic, in front of patients and nurses and doctors, the powerful billionaire kneeled before the woman he had wronged. Emma's breath hitched. Nicholas. His voice was raw, honest, unguarded. "I was a fool," he said. "I let my past, my fears, make me push away the best thing that ever happened to me." Emma swallowed hard, tears threatening to well in her eyes. Nicholas held her gaze, his blue eyes filled with regret. "I should have trusted you," he whispered. "I should have fought for you instead of doubting you." Emma's heart ached, her fingers curling into her palms. For so long, she had wanted to hear these words. But was it enough? "I don't know if I can go through that pain again, Nicholas," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Nicholas's hands tightened into fists against the floor. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving that you can," he vowed. And for the first time, she believed him. The next morning, the entire world woke up to a breaking news headline. Nicholas Blackwell exposes the truth. Emma Carter was framed. He had gone public, revealing the corruption behind the scandal, exposing his own business partner's betrayal. More importantly, he had cleared Emma's name. The world owed her an apology, but all she had ever wanted was his. Their love story truly begins. That evening, Nicholas stood outside the clinic, waiting. And when Emma finally walked toward him, her arms folded, her expression unreadable, he held his breath. Then, in the quiet of the street, she whispered, "Don't ever doubt me again." And Nicholas, for the first time in years, felt whole. "I swear," he murmured, stepping closer, his fingers brushing against hers. And when she didn't pull away, he knew. She was his, and he would spend forever making sure she never regretted it. Emma's kindness changed her life forever. From saving a stranger to finding a family, her journey proves that fate has a way of bringing people together when they least expect it. To heart, backhand index pointing right, what do you think? Was Nicholas's apology enough? Would you have forgiven him? Let us know in the comments below. Speech balloon if you love this story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartwarming and suspenseful stories. Bell turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Glowing Star, thank you for watching. See you in the next story. Glowing Star.